Kim Lannon here with the man who says he doesn't understand why he draws such attention from women that's so negative.
Not attention.
What did you say?
Reaction.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Why it's a strong reaction.
Yes.
Well, we could have many shows on why you draw a strong attraction.
We could have many shows on women.
Well, we could have many shows on men too.
Yeah, true. Absolutely true.
Men named Lou.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, good morning. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good.
I'm not too hot yet.
I know. Well, this is supposed to be the last big 90 plus day for like a couple days after this.
Okay, good.
So that's a good thing, right?
But it's not going to go 60s, right?
No.
Like it does here in New York?
No, no, we're not going into winter yet. It's still July. Not yet. You know how it is. It's like the last day of August. It turns into like we go from beautiful weather to it's like weird, you know? All of a sudden, no more beach.
My dog has robbed me of two very important things.
Okay.
I love fireworks and I love thunderstorms. And he's robbed me of it because it freaks him out.
Well, last night
and I have to take care of him.
Last night was a whopper.
Yeah.
It came in like gangbusters, didn't it? It was crazy last night. So anyway, right off the top, very exciting to say that please, everyone that's listening, because we're going to talk today right into the show about our topic. But first of all, if you are not a follower of me on TikTok yet, I'm putting up daily, or almost daily. I got a complaint from several people that, where did you go last week? Because I ran out of material and I hadn't had a chance to put any TikToks up. So I've been doing, anywhere from, 10 to 30 to 60-second bits of like tips and stuff, or inspirational things. So if you're not a follower of me yet on TikTok, please like, follow, and share on TikTok. Go to dr.kimlannon and please follow me and let all your friends know. And then come on over here and bring them here.
Yes, exactly.
So that we have a crossover effect. That would be fantastic. Because, it's about living your best life and trying to do different things. And obviously, all the shows aren't going to be pertinent to everybody all the time, but nonetheless, I try to make it useful for everybody in some generalizable way.
No, but if you're not dealing with this, you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with this.
Well, that's the thing, is it right? And so I'm hoping that everyone can get a benefit out of everything. But if you go to TikTok, you're going to get little quick splices of tips, and you get to see me working out twice, and you get to see me in handstands,
and they're artsy,
and I have a great little creative director who's working with me on those things, so it's not just me. He's doing a fabulous job, and so we're teaming together, and he's doing a fantastic job of doing that.
Nice.
And clearly, because at the beginning of the week I put one up on my own and it was a flop because I didn't actually do it right, and he was like, "What are you doing? Stop it. Just stop it." And I'm like, "This is why I have you."
Is he of drinking age yet?
No. No, he's not.
Usually the experts are young.
He's not of drinking age, but he does give me a lot of reasons to drink.
Well, there's that. Yeah.
Anyway, so but I just wanted to say, come on over to dr.kimlannon, and if you can put that up there, Lou, that would be great. For my TikTok. Also, you can follow me on Instagram because they cross over, but TikTok would be better just because that's where I'm pushing people towards. It makes it, there you go. There you go. There it is. I had it. Well, I was like, hello, put it up. Okay. So this week, we're going to take a little time off of all the other things we've been talking about and move a little over into people are stressed.
Think?
Yeah. But we won't get into the reasons why, but we'll just talk about the fact that people are very stressed. And I was going to talk today about a couple things related to it, about how to build healthy resilience around personal stress, and also about a topic that I don't really call it out as this when I talk about it in with clients. I don't call it out by this name or whatever, but really, in fact, because it gets this weird kind of like voodoo-y, kind of hocus pocusy kind of like reaction from a lot of people, but it really isn't. And so I'm going to try to take the stigma out of it by talking about it for what it really is. But when someone says, you really have to have radical acceptance, people go, "Oh God, what is that?" Because it like when I say it, what does it feel like to you? What is it?
Well,
don't say what just like, what is it that you feel?
Feels hippie.
Right.
Yeah.
Why does it feel hippie?
It doesn't to me because I've done the work. But
okay, so
first of all, radical.
Okay. So hold on to the other thing of like I've done the work too, because I want to come back to that. So if I don't remember it, I'm going to come
Okay.
back. So, okay. So it feels hippie,
Yeah.
right? It feels, I called it voodoo schmoodoo, right? So
It's like when you say positive thinking.
God forbid,
Yeah.
that's such a bizarre thought, right? So that's why I don't use the word positive
meditation.
thinking. I use productive thoughts, productive outcomes. Like I changed the word to action oriented because people for some reason really have I know the reason, but the use of positive is too ethereal, I think, for people, because
it's kind of 60s too. That was a theme from the 60s.
Well, right. And it was a theme, but you have people that are not that generation that still kind of get that reaction of like, oh, what does that mean? It's just, it's an overused cliche word. I think it's, just do it. Nike would be a similar thing. It's like, just do it. Well, yes, just do it. But you also have to have more meaning behind it. So it's
meditation has a stigma.
Meditation has a stigma. Mindfulness has a stigma. And so when you say radical acceptance,
be present,
be
people freak out.
God forbid, so all these things are really actually important to having, you're really living your best life. If you've never done any kind of work with people, or you don't know anyone that's done work with, or yourself, if not you, but people have not done work in AA, for instance, there's a lot of terminology that comes from the AA genre that's actually, when you actually think about it on a day-to-day basis, it actually has a lot of meaning. One day at a time. People are like, oh, please, but it actually is important, because it is important. One day at a time.
Cliches for a reason.
Right. And so being able to use them and actually understand them and really put them to practice. So all those things that we just mentioned go into this concept of, how to live with more stress resilience in your life. And so the topic is really living with stress resilience, but also how do you do that? And there's different ways of doing that. And so I go in the overarching thing that when I talk to people, I'm thinking radical acceptance. And what that means is not the hippie back in the 60s or even back in the 90s when, people were doing a lot of that stuff. Speaking of that, I just feel like I just had a moment of I just had to jump over, and I'm going to call it a Donald Trump moment where he just goes off into a tangent of something else. But Richard Simmons died.
Yeah.
So that was my one Donald Trump moment. That's like what he does, how he talks about the sharks in the boat. What I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, it wasn't political. It was just that it came to mind, and I was like, oh, I just felt like Donald Trump for a second. Not really.
No, it came to mind, so it wasn't Biden. So
okay, and see,
it wasn't a Biden moment.
Okay, just what? Stop it.
Yeah.
Okay, going back now. Let's edit that out. We're gonna edit you out. That was not the point.
I know.
But Richard Simmons comes up in my mind because he really had a really big following, but at the same time, because of the way he was around all those concepts that I'm talking about right now, and that are stigmatized still, and they've been stigmatized for so long, and they're actually a really important part of good mental health and living life to its fullest and best on a daily. And it goes against being an instant gratification. It goes against quick Band-Aid fixes in life, whether it's something you think or you take for medication or you eat, or what it's actually having to do the work. So 2 concepts here today.
Simmons was interesting because he came in when those sayings and those concepts were hip, if I can use the term.
Here we go.
And then he went through the full cycle. He went when people just walked away from him totally and rolled their eyes.
Right.
And now it's starting to come back.
And I don't think it ever went away. I think it just kind of just did a little dip.
No, but it needed to be presented a different way. That presentation wasn't acceptable to people.
Well, he was a lot.
Yeah.
And I think people,
No, I meant just the terms that we used, meditation and be present. And
well, and I think meditation and Richard Simmons didn't go hand in hand, because he was like, a tigger. And, we're thinking more Buddha and Zen, right? And also that's the other part, is people often think of those terms in terms of religion, and they're not religious based. And when someone says Buddha, and that comes with radical acceptance as well, someone says Buddha, that's not actually religion, and it's not necessarily spirituality. It's actually a lifestyle of a cultural set of people that happen to live more at peace with oneself.
Yeah.
And it's teaching that. And yes, there is an entity of the spirituality, if you want it to be, just like in AA or other things. But it's really about, if you can just take it for what it is. Now, that's part of radical acceptance. So when I speak to people about how to live stress resilience wise. I'm in my head thinking radical acceptance. I'm getting people to try to go towards complete and total acceptance of what is. So that phrase that people often hate, which it is what it is, or it was what it was, that irritates people. And it irritates people why? Because it's like about, you have to accept that the thing is what it is. And that's annoying to people. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Right? It's like, well,
because
it's like, I don't want to accept that. So when you say that, that's annoying to me or agitates me, because that means that there is no other way. That doesn't mean that there is no other way. It means that if you can fully sit in the shit with what is at the moment and not then get stuck in ruminating that it has nowhere to move or it has nowhere to go, because that's not true, then you have the acceptance piece that comes along with, okay, I have to not be in denial. I have to know that this is what is. I have to know the parameters around that. I know what I can't change around that. Mm-hmm. And then because of that, I can then move into this other piece, which is I can move it in a different direction. It might not be like huge initially, but if you just go into, okay, what can I do in this moment today to change this in some way? Or what do I have control over that can then maybe move it 3 weeks from now, but it's incremental and accumulates. But people have a hard time thinking about that because we live in that instant gratification. We live in let's go, let's go, let's go. And unfortunately, people get stuck when they refuse, essentially, in their minds, their bodies, their subconscious, to get into radical acceptance. And radical acceptance comes in those two parts. It's understanding that you have no control over, that's the first step, no control over whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then accepting that it is what it is. And therefore, we have to then move with what it is. We can't change it, because that's one of the things that has to do with stress resiliency, is getting the acceptance of what is it that we can actually control. Mm-hmm. So
the choice is to effectively respond to reality or fight reality.
Right. And what do you think most people do?
Fight reality.
Right. And so that's where my 3 R's often come in with my patients that I've been doing for years is it real, rational, and reasonable? And people have a hard time with that 3R concept that I give them, because you can find a way to make something feel presumptively, assumptively like it is real, rational, and reasonable. When in fact, if there are no facts to back up the thought, if there are no facts to drive that thought, then there's no reality to it that's other than your perception that makes it seem like, well, because my history, if that happens, this is more likely that it's going to be this outcome. But usually that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And so when you're having, for instance, you have a thought that, okay, my parent thinks I'm a failure, so therefore I'm a failure. It leads to a feeling of that, and that, there's your thought. So the feeling is hopelessness, helplessness, sadness, depression, anxiety, whatever the feeling is. And then there's a behavior: drinking, drugging, eating, exercising, isolation, whatever the behavior might be, or all of those. So when you come to radical acceptance and you really accept for what it is you test out that thought is, do I think I'm a failure, or am I believing that someone else thinks that? Mm-hmm. And if that's true, if I don't really believe I'm a failure on my own merit, and it's just because someone has told me that, or I think they think that, what are the facts that are actually going to back up that I am truly a failure? Facts. And it's like anyone I talk to that, like, say I have people in addiction, the answer, they search and they search and they search, and they'll come up with things like, well, because, my mother said it, my father said it, my teacher said it. And I'm like, that's not a fact. That's just an opinion that was given to you about someone that made a judgment on you. That's not fact. That's just their opinion. Mm-hmm. It's itchy in here today. Can you tell? I'm like, there's something in here today. Ron was here.
He's coming.
I know.
Yeah.
But that's so important for people, I think, to understand that you believe a perception of someone else, or that your perception of a perception of someone else is fact, and it's not. Yep. And that in and of itself leads you to accept that you have not a lot of options if you believe in that. You don't have an option to feel differently in your mind. You don't have an option to do something different, which is why people get stuck in those addictions, or why people get stuck in patterns where they feel like they really can't move out of them. People also get in their own way of, I've tried everything and nothing works, therefore I'm stuck. That's not true. There's always a million other ways. That's like when people become suicidal ideation, they have ideas of like, well, I'd be better off not here, or things like that. There's never not a solution. It's just that people tap into the spaces that they don't then get themselves outside the box to think about other solutions. So when people, I can think of a client or two that have had like financial woes over the years, and they get themselves really stuck. Like one, just an overspender, just can't, another person gambling, right? That they just lose their money. They just can't keep their money. They're not good. I'm throwing things. And the hopelessness that comes with that, because it's like, well, if I don't have all the money, then I'm not worthwhile. There's a thought, right? And then there's a feeling. And so what's the option? Some people have the thought process of, there's always ways to make more money, and then they do it. But then you have people that do not do that. So they don't live in the acceptance of what is that I spend money, I overspend, or I gamble, or I do these things. And therefore that makes me have these terrible feelings. And then what happens is I repeat the behavior in hopes that I can make that up, but I don't. And then I'm in this vicious cycle. So that's an extreme example of most of my clients. That is not most of my clients, but that is an extreme example of what it's like for people to get stuck in those patterns, because not only do they get stuck because they don't accept where they're at and then try to utilize different strategies and coping mechanisms to have resiliency against their stress, they just feed the same pattern over and over again. And that gets them deeper and deeper and deeper. And then obviously there can be end results where people become suicidal, which if they do, they should call 988, which is the suicide hotline. But nonetheless, if it doesn't get to that point, it's about really looking at, okay, what do I need to do fact-wise here? What do I need to see? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I saying to myself? What are others saying? What am I buying into? What am I believing in that's driving me into feeling like I somehow can control the situation when I can't, or I can't control someone else, or I can't control for, what already is. And that's the thing about,
or I can't control it when I actually can.
So there are, right. So the tip about that piece is going to be basically that you have to figure out what is it that you can control about the situation that you're in. But in the meantime, you have to be first step always. And this is where people get into it's hippie, or it's like, it's that psychology mumbo jumbo thing. But it's the only way that I know of that really works is that you have to let yourself sit. And this is what I tell clients all that. You got to sit with your shit. You have to be able to sit with your shit to be able to really look at it instead of denying it, avoiding it, pretending like you didn't gain 300 pounds, pretending like you don't have an alcohol problem or a spending problem, or, now I got bugs in here. Did this office today?
I don't have environmental control in here.
Thank you. But hoping that really resonates with people, that if they can understand themselves, that to give themselves grace in those moments of, I have control over this, but I don't have control over what has already happened.
Well, okay. So we get to the two basic principles that are really important for people. One is personal responsibility. You're generally responsible for your outcomes. I mean, obviously there's external
forces. People don't
forces.
like to hear that.
No, they don't, because they have to accept responsibility.
But that's accepting what is.
Secondly, the current...
Dad, you're interrupting.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that. That's accepting what is.
Yes.
If we stay in that
terminology. I was
terminology.
going to take it to the second step.
I know, but I just wanted to give different words. Listen, it's my show.
The current reality is a sum of your actions and decisions, largely.
Right.
So you can't fix it because it's an equation. It's the other end of an equation. But what you can do is fix going forward.
Well, correct. And in addition to that, you have to be able to look. So it has to be able to be looked at in the fact that you, the individual who's listening here today, you have to be able to not externalize that it's not in your control and that somehow everyone else has done this to you. You cannot play victim. You cannot be victim. Even if you have been victimized, you still have the ability to move yourself forward. But if you if you sit in your shit in the way that you do, in a negative way, not in the productive way I'm talking about, right? Because people will sit in their shit and then not do anything about it, right?
Yep.
And clearly I'm using the word shit today because there's no better way to describe that. You sit in the depths of your crap in your head and you have two choices. You can either do something about it or you can continue the pattern and not do, and then that just perpetuates your suffering and your stress, and your resiliency just drops because it just feeds off your soul, so to speak. Your mental health just goes down the tubes with that. So you have to be able to sit with your uncomfortable feelings about what is and what it is and be honest with yourself. And then the second piece is then you have to be able to move it forward, and you have to say, okay, what do I have control over? And how do I now move forward? And many people will go right into, well, I don't have any control over anything about this. That's not true. There are things you have control over. It depends on the situation. So if someone was like giving me a context, I could do it, but I could give you the way to out. But even when I do that with people, if I can walk them through a whole thing and like give them like a step-by-step thing, I'll still get resistance to, but it's not going to work. And that's because the negative mindset, right? The created negative closed mind, not the open mind, not the productive mindset, is so rooted in their neurological neural pathways at that point, because we have learned helplessness. So Martin Seligman, very famous on this concept, is that we learn helplessness. We learn to become a victim to ourselves. We gaslight ourselves. When no one else is there to gaslight after we've already been gaslit, we then gaslight ourselves into abusing ourselves into the process. And what I'm talking about is this is learned optimism. Is we have to learn. If you can learn to be helpless, you can learn to be optimistic. You can learn to be again, that will be like, oh God, it's so hippie. But it's not. We have to learn to be productive. We have to look at where can we make headway here. Someone came to me yesterday, and I did interrupt you, but I wanted to not lose my train of thought. Someone came to me yesterday at the end of the day, and we were talking about her feeling stuck in her career and things like that. And she sort of sometimes gets into that pattern a little bit, but she's a little bit more forward moving. And finally, she kept saying, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, you must start, and this was about a job. You must start looking at what do you need to do to be in a different job that those requirements that you don't feel you have would meet while you stay in the job you're at, so that when you feel confident enough that you have those 2 or 3 other skills that are required to jump ship, then you can feel confident to do that. And you could see the light bulb all of a sudden go off, that like, it's not an all or nothing. It was like, she's stuck in this job. She really wants to quit, but she's got a mortgage, she's, single, she's got all these things going on, but she feels trapped. And I said, you are not trapped. You are, your reality in your head right now is a fantasy that you believe that you're trapped, when in fact that if I took a job and I said, okay, here's a job that you like, here's the requirements that they say that you have to have, and you're missing 2 of the requirements that are pretty significant, but you can get the certification in that in 6 weeks, and you can get the other thing by taking like a 2-week course. And all of a sudden it was like a register of like, oh, I'm like, so in 8 weeks you would have those certifications that you need, and you don't need the experience. They just want you to be trained in it. And I just shifted the perspective to bring it outside the box of what is and made it something new. And she was like, oh, I didn't even think of that, because her mindset was, I'm stuck. I'm sitting in it. I'm stuck. I'm so depressed. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a second. I can do that. But sometimes people can't, and not because they can't, they don't know how to jump themselves out of that box, which is one of the things that by coming to me, I teach that. Not a lot of therapists will teach you how to do that. They'll do a lot of, how does that make you feel? Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but how does it make you feel? How does it make you feel? And you'll do 10 years of therapy and you'll still be doing, how does it make you feel? That's not a solution focused therapy, and it's a waste of time. And
often they don't want to understand. I'm sorry. Often they don't want to understand that they can walk out.
Say more. What do you mean?
Well, in my work, one of the sayings that stuck with me for a long period of time is the magic starts to happen when you are more fearful of what is than what could be. When you're more fearful of the current situation and opposed to the change.
Yeah, people don't get there.
No,
So that's
but
part of the radical acceptance piece. People deny, they put blinders on as if like the what could be is bad.
If you teach them they can walk out, they have the power to walk out.
Right.
Like you taught that woman.
Right.
They have to accept that they walked in. And that's accepting responsibility. And people are very uncomfortable accepting responsibility for the current situation.
And that's my point about the first step is the one that people don't like, because it's the acceptance of what is. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, it's too painful. It's too uncomfortable. It's like, oh, and people are
I can't do that. That's why I'm here.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And those are words people use is this is why I'm here. And it's like, no, actually, you have to be able to look at like, okay, so if you could be there, you could be somewhere else too. You just have to move it.
Here's the beauty of that. When that light goes off and they figure out they can, and they have some control over their outcomes, that momentum starts to build. People get really excited about that.
That's what I was trying to say to her yesterday. And by the end of the session, you could feel her excitement going, and hopefully she can hang on to that, because, how is she only sees me every 2 weeks, and she's like, it's that, oh God, can she maintain it? And I have that constant, people say, I saw you a week, if people are on a weekly, it's one thing. So I'll get like, I was good for 4 days. And the last 3 days I lose the, in the mojo. And then, people who see me every 2 weeks, they're like, I was good for the first week and a half. And then I lose, So it's about being able to accumulate in that way and maintain the excitement in the room of those 45 minutes to an hour, to be able to say, okay, I can accumulate this and move it forward and not lose sight of it. And I warned her, I said, if you go into your job today and you don't keep in mind, or you don't write down the goal of how to do this, you're going to get sucked into the next couple of days and be right back to I'm stuck. Because your brain immediately forgets what we talked about when the idea of, how to do it. And going back to what you said about wanting to do it, this is like when people say, no one ever wants to be stuck, really. No one ever wants to be an addict. No one wants to be overweight. No one wants to be an anorexic. No one wants to be, a narcissist. Yeah, they do, because that's their thing. Most people don't want to be the thing that's not working for them. It just, they don't wake up and say, I want my day to be terrible. But they don't want to accept they're responsible for it. And because the culture has become so strong socially right now around us, and especially in the past, like 2 decades, I think really strongly about just instant gratification, just the distress tolerance is so low for people who have to wait for something. So for instance, I gave an assignment a couple weeks ago in my class. And I gave them a rewrite on it, so they could work on it, given that I was teaching them a specific technique on it. But I had already graded the original, and I decided I wanted to give them more technique on how to do this. So instead of giving them back the original, I asked them all to go back and rework it. And it was hard for a lot of people not to get back the one that I had already because I had said, I graded it. I decided that I think that I need to give you more of the stylistic components of how to do this the more accurate way for the writing you need to do for clinical, in my class, clinical training. And I would say probably half of the class and maybe even more, but outwardly at least half the class had a really hard time sitting with the gratification of knowing what it was. And I said, I'm not going to give it back, because I'm not going to taint the emotional status that you're in right now, because I'm giving you the tools to actually write clinically better. And I don't want to be tainted by like me having red marks all over a paper that isn't going to mean anything at this point, because I noted that everybody needs work on this. So, but that's an example of just as a collective whole, like, it's a good size N, population to be able to say people just really across the board, even people that have good stress tolerance, still sit with, they really just wanted to know. And even if I hadn't said, I had great, they still were like, well, where's the other one? I still want to see. It's like, no. And that was really hard. And being able to sit with that in our society of, I want it now. I don't want to do the work. Mm-hmm. But some people will admit that they don't want to do the work, but most people will do that in their head and then not admit it out loud that they just don't want to do the work. Doing the work across the board is key to success in anything.
Yep.
If you go to work at a job and you don't do the work, someone else picks up the slack, you might slide in and be under the radar and get by for a while. Of course, people will resent you. It's like doing a group project. There's always one that will do the work, and then everyone else is like, well, you're doing good for us, like that kind of thing. But there's more of those, and that's why I hate group projects, because you can always tell. And I always warn my class when I give a group project, and I do it and I give it as a way of like, this is a team exercise, and I can tell when someone stands out versus it becoming equal across the board. And I look for, and I give them a way to be like, you must do this piece, you must do this piece, you must do this piece. There's no passing the buck, so that it's building teamwork by incentivizing the fact that there's a reward for an individual grade, for instance, in this, plus a group grade. And if you don't do your individual work, you're bringing down the whole group grade. So it's an interesting phenomenon that happens. Obviously, it's that diffusion of responsibility. That's a very famous social psychology phenomenon, and it's just that if someone else will do it, then we don't have to. If something else can do it for us, we don't have to. Kind of like, I hate to go back to the whole exercise thing, but I will. There's always the machines. There's a machine out now that is just the most ridiculous machine for people who, for people who have arthritis and they're 85 and they're sitting in their chair and they're not they don't have good mobility and they've got the little pedal thing underneath your feet. Okay, great. But if you think that you're, 35 years old or whatever, and you're, 300 pounds and you're going to pedal yourself under your desk all day and that's going to lose weight. Okay. Yeah. It's the diffusion of responsibility, finding the next thing, those machines that they used to have where they just shake you and the fat would fall off. Yeah. That doesn't used to how those worked. They didn't. It's shortcutting. It's shortcutting to get away from sitting with accepting what is, because we don't like it. We don't like the way it makes us feel, but we don't ever think about that it could feel different. Even though we want it to feel different, we don't really go that way. We go right back to what we know. And the default in our brain is so learned helplessness of, and I call it the Eeyore versus the Tigger. You need to be less of it. We love Eeyore. Eeyore's great, but Eeyore's depressed all the time. Eeyore's down all the time. Eeyore has a really hard time getting out of his own way in Winnie the Pooh. Tigger, we need more Tigger and Wise Owl. Now, we don't need all of Tigger. We just need the energy and motivation of Tigger and the outlook that Tigger has. But we also then need some wise mind of Wise Owl. So I use the Winnie the Pooh metaphor a lot with clients across the board in almost all their issues, because do we want to be an Eeyore or do we want to be a Tigger? Do we want to be Piglet? There's each character that comes from Winnie the Pooh is fantastic in being able to say, you got to move yourself more into this. And these are the pieces that you have to have. And wise mind is so important here. Wise mind of Wise Owl is you got to really think hard about, what do I really want? Do I want to sit in this? And if I do, I'm making a choice to sit in it. And people don't like to hear that either. I'm not choosing to do this. Yes, you are. Every second, every moment, everything that you do that doesn't move you forward, or at least try to move you forward, and you still are sitting in the same spot, means that you're not using your wise mind.
Well, can I drag you into the woods with another saying that
Yes.
we'll roll our eyes at?
Yes.
Manifesting.
Yeah, people don't know what that means. Manifest your destiny.
Well, here's the thing. Your current situation, you manifest it. Through your predominant thought, through your choices, through your actions. Right. And yes, there was some luck, there was some outside influence involved, no doubt about it.
Right.
But the sum of your thoughts and actions got you where you are now.
Yes.
Which is bad news because of where you are, possibly. But the good news is you can change it.
Well, right.
Like, for example, your woman who you talked about who needed the 2 certifications.
Right.
She keeps a thought in that mind. She goes home, she hits Google, and she says, where's the courses?
Right.
Oh, there's one in town.
Or there's online.
And it starts Tuesday.
Right.
Or there's one online.
Right.
That's easy. I can do that. that's manifesting, because you just keep that thought in your head and it leads you there. People think manifesting is magical.
Right.
It's not. It's human psychology.
And that's the misnomer about all those words that I used at the beginning, and putting that one in there. And manifesting feels so overwhelming to people. It's like, how do I manifest?
It's mystic.
Right. It's like got this, ethereal, spiritual, hokey pokey thing. And it doesn't. It's literally like, create it for yourself. Create something for yourself. But people that sits better. And I don't use manifesting a lot unless I know a person. I have clients that definitely are much more, transcendental. They look for, meditation.
Yeah.
They do those things with me. Like, we go through moments, 5 minutes at the beginning, 5 minutes in. But most of my clients won't do that. Don't do that. Don't know what it is. And when they hear it, it's like, so when you say you have to manifest it, I don't say that. I say we have to create a new scenario. We have to create a new path that sits well, because that's cognitive. It's like, okay, I can grab that. It also, for some reason, feels to most people like it takes the responsibility sort of off of them. So they're creating it, but they still get to hold on to some of the old stuff, because people like to hold on to the old stuff. So it's an easier way to get people to move into it. But it's really about, you are the manifester of your next thing. If you just sit accepting what is without movement, and you complain about it, that you don't like the is that is,
you perpetuate it.
You're perpetuating it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, so if you have an alcohol problem, if you have an eating problem, if you have a sex addiction, if you have problems at work with people, if you have relational issues, well, okay, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to change it? Are you accepting it? Are you accepting it and sitting in it? Or are you accepting it and saying, okay, what do I need to do to move it?
Yeah.
And there's that. It's just it's a 3-step process for accepting, radical acceptance. It's that first. I'm going to keep repeating it, because it's like, okay, let's get it. It's sitting with awareness that it is what it is, and this is what it is, and being honest and not denying it and not putting it away. And then, now what am I going to do about it once I realize that this is what it is?
Yep. And
what am I going to do about it doesn't have to be an end goal. It just has to be, what am I going to do today to make it better for me?
It's better that way.
Right. So, and then when you get there, you have to go back to the first thing and make sure you stay in the moment of, I have to accept what is, and then move it forward. But here's what happens to people, and not just people that come to me, is I have to accept what is. I don't like that. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then
I'm not over in debt. I'm not overweight. I'm not an alcoholic. You're not accepting.
And I'm going to do most people, not everybody, most people will be like, well, but I call it the yes, but syndrome. Yes, but that doesn't work. Yes, but I've tried that. Yes, but, yes, but. And I'm like, oh, you have the YB syndrome. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? Yes, but. Yes, but. And so here's a really good exercise. How many times, if this is resonating with you, how many times a day do you say, yes, but?
Yeah.
Yes, but. And so if you can count up that, and then when you figure it out, because it's going to be a lot, catch yourself and see if you can say yes, and don't put in the but stuff. Say, yes, and I'm going to move on it. Yes, and I'm going to change something today. Yes, and I'm going to make it better. I'm not sure how, which is totally reasonable to say. I'm not sure how.
Right.
And at the same time, it's and, because and is movement forward. We're trying to move productively forward. We're trying to create, not manifest, right? To make it nicer for people. We're going to try to create a new pattern. We're going to create a new habit, which you hear a lot about, right? In our lives. We're going to try to live our best lives through being in the moment, which is, hey, today it is what it is. It's 95 degrees out and you want to be at the beach, but you have to be at work. So what are you going to do about it? Well, if you can get outside for 10 minutes, I have to accept that I sit on Thursdays, I sit for essentially 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. 3.5 hours is standing in a classroom teaching. So what do? I make sure that I can get in between somewhere 10, 15 minutes to get outside in a beautiful weather, because I know what my lot of that day is, right? It's being accepting of that. Do I like it? No, but I know what I can do to at least be like, okay, at least I got out, at least I did something. Because those are the things that are important to me. Like, what's important to you? Identify that. It's important to me to make sure that in the summer months, especially in the summer, well, spring, summer, and fall, but that I get out in the sun because we have such hard winters. So although that might not be your thing, I find it important because I know that if I sit too long, I'm having a health issue, right? I know that I have to create a new way of doing things to make it better. So like, and people know this that are in my practice, last October, they watched me bring in a walking pad into my office because I know medically that I'm sitting too long and that shortens your life by a lot. So I knew that. So I was very resentful of my own choices of sitting so long because I love the work I do. So I had to be like, okay, how do I do my work and still be able to do this and not feel resentful towards myself for being stuck? So I was like, I'm going to bring in a walking pad. I'm not going to have, my blood pressure going up because I'm sitting, and I'm not going to have, because I don't get out, all these things. So I made a choice to actively be, and I told my clients, I said, this is what this is. If you're not okay with me doing it well, then we can go out and walk and talk together, right? Because that's right. And people are like, oh, let's do that. I have so many clients that love doing that, right? And then, or I'm going to be, if I'm on a telehealth, I'll walk and talk. And I've got people now doing it with me because they're like, because they're like, oh, I never even thought I could do that, right? So it's about, and so from October to April, minus the fact that I lost a gallbladder, I lost 45 pounds. Why? Because I stopped sitting, and I was stressed all the time around the fact that I was sitting, and I was just sitting in weight that I knew that was not coming off because I was sitting too long. And then I moved it. Whew, right?
Yeah.
And I lost a gallbladder.
Wow.
Which probably because I lost so much weight so fast. I mean, and at the end of the day, I think that was a big part of it. But, in 10 years of
I think you touched on one of the biggest things of acceptance that we need to embrace. And you touched on in the discussion that acceptance that we don't know how to figure this out yet. I don't have all the answers.
Right.
Because I think that's what intimidates people when they start to move and they say, okay, I understand I can fix this. I don't know how. Right. That's okay.
Right. Well, and that's why people come to people like me is because most of the time people don't know how to do what they're trying to do. They get stuck and they don't know. They're looking for how do I do it? And here's the unfortunate, in my field. So, because I consider myself much more progressive in terms of, solutions and focus and moving and talk. And I don't do the whole traditional, 45 minutes and I don't really speak a lot. And
how does that make you feel?
How does that make you feel thing makes me crazy. And I always introduce that to clients, and clients that's one of their complaints about other therapists that they've been to is that they became friends with them. They loved them. They thought they were great. They were with them for 10 years, but they didn't do anything. They just became familiar. And, in my office, I can't guarantee that it's not always like, movement always, but 90% of the time, we're moving and we're getting going and talking and getting it going. And I'm an active participant in the process because, I do the whole body, whole system, whole holistic naturopathy. We take into consideration medical, sleep, psychology, family, environment, job, the whole gamut. Whereas you really can't move a person on the dime essentially to get them to their how if you're too busy going, how does that make you feel? Yeah. If you don't know how it makes them feel and you're doing this work, no offense, but
those are first 2 or 3 session things. That's teaching processing. Right. And then once you teach it, you use it, you go on.
Right. And in my experience, most of my clients that I see, I don't need to say, how does that make you feel? I just can reflect back usually. And I usually don't get I've been doing this so long. I don't usually miss that beat of like, wow, I can tell how that can make you feel. But we're not going to sit and just talk about how it makes you feel all day. We already know what are we going to do about it? Anxiety. They're not here for me to repeat that they feel crappy.
Anxiety is often named as thinking you have to have everything figured out at once.
Right.
And trust me, nobody has everything figured out.
well, you can never have everything figured out.
Yeah.
That's the whole process of life, is constantly going through the journey, but you can live anxiety free. You can live stress less. I use that word on purpose.
Yes.
You can live stress less. It's about accepting like what is. You can either be like today, okay, it's whatever the bad thing is of the day. Okay. Well, if you sit in it and you just ruminate on it, well, you're going to not be very resilient to the stress, because you're trying to control for something that has no control over it, maybe. But are you really thinking about the first thing? What do you have control over about this? You know, people are all complaining about the weather. I love the weather, even though I come in and be like, it's so hot. But
well, that's the exchange we had. You're talking about, it's going to get worse here. So I haven't followed the weather, because it is what it is. I get up, I walk out the door, and
right. And well,
I got to deal with it.
And that's the thing, is like the only, so
I can't change it.
I don't care about the weather in terms of that. I care about the fact that I'm not in it. So what do I do about that, so that I don't get myself stressed? Because it stresses me that I don't get to be in it. So I specifically make sure that if someone's going to do a call with me, I'm out moving in the heat. I'll go out. They know. They're like, we'll walk and talk. That's how we do. They know that this is what I do, because that's what's needed for me. That's how I combat the what is. Because I could sit in my office and be, very regimented, that I have to sit at a desk and stare at the phone or stare at the computer to talk to you. And most of the people that I do this with, they'll be doing the same thing. So we're walking and talking. So I'll say, make sure you wear sneakers, because we're going.
Yeah.
And we do that. So I'm helping them. They're helping me. And, there's nothing wrong with that. And we're solutioning out, because that would be a time when I get a lot of people that wouldn't take the 45 minutes to an hour to go out for a walk that day because of my thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They're going.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, walk therapy, or, it's psychosocial rehab essentially, but it's walk therapy. And people will be like, oh, I would never have gotten out today to walk. So this is awesome. I'm like, yeah.
And just the power of a walk alone.
Yeah.
I mean, not to diminish what you're doing with them, but just the power of a walk alone is immense. And people don't understand that either. So,
and just in that concept, right, talking about what is, if you get outside, and people think, I always say, get out in nature. Now, nature doesn't have to be going to the woods.
No. Even
though that's wonderful and fabulous, or going to the beach. It's, if you can get out and just walk for 15, 20 minutes, or no, like my whole session's 45 minutes. But if you can just get out and do 15 minutes in the outdoors, it lowers your cortisol level by 15% on that day.
Yep.
Cortisol is the hormone that creates the distress in your body that makes you feel bloated, inflamed, irritable, agitated, makes you eat more, makes you, not happy. And the more the cortisol goes rushing through, and your pancreas gets inflamed, and your liver and all your metabolism changes, all those things. So if you can get out for 15, I'd love for you to get more, but 15 to 20 minutes a day, that lowers your cortisol by 15% in some of the studies that they've done. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
Yep.
And imagine if you're out for 45 minutes to an hour or two, and like when people do weekend warrioring, and they go out and they garden and they, you're getting a huge jolt of cortisol drop.
Yep.
Usually, because it exhausts you, it makes you feel great, it does all these like wonderful things for you. But if you're a person who's sitting at your desk all day, or you're a person that's at home and you work from home, go outside for 15, 20 minutes. Sit, don't sit, go out in the backyard and move around, or walk up and down the street. Cortisol drops, and it changes perspective. So if you watch my TikTok today, I did a whole thing on, sometimes you have to change your world upside down to change your perspective. So if you go to my TikTok at Dr.Kim Lannon, there's just a very quick video, and it's me doing handstands on top of mountaintops all over the country. When I go to the top of a mountain, my end of my mountain climb before I come back down is I always do a handstand at the top, like on the edge. And people are like, oh, you're so close to the edge. Sometimes it looks a little more on the edge than it is, but I just make it look good that it's on the edge. But sometimes I'm not. But it's about the fact that sometimes you really have to turn. It's the theme of radical acceptance. You have to turn things upside down to really see things from a different perspective. And That's how you live your life with intention on a day to day. And people, there's another phrase, oh, live your life with intention. Yeah, you have to actually live with intention today, that today's not going to be a shitty day.
And I also think the walk and the handstand is part of being in the moment too. The other roll the eye phrase. This is important. That's skill building, to be able to draw yourself into the moment for longer and longer periods of time is super important. I think that's a big anxiety reliever as well.
Absolutely. And so if we stick with the, shifting your perspective, flipping it upside down on its head, so to speak, my handstand metaphor, which is why I use that, is that, okay, for me, it's, I shift my perspective by climbing the mountain. I top it off with a handstand because it puts my head right. And then I come down in a different frame of mind. And at the end, I'm like, oh, and there's been times when like I've climbed and there's been a thunder or lightning storm in the halfway point of the mountain and I've had to come down, and that messes with my head that I didn't get to go to the top to do the flip upside down to make it change. And so I definitely have an emotional difference in the days that that has happened on occasion over the years I've been hiking, that if I don't make it to the top to be able to do the topper at the top, it changes my perspective. And then I have to sit with what is that the weather came in and it was a problem, right? You do Mount Washington, for people that are here in the Northeast, it's the worst weather in the entire North. I think it's the worst weather. I think it's the worst weather anywhere. And you can start off at the bottom. John and Cameron did it a couple weeks ago, and that was the weekend of my run that I did the run before the run. Right? Remember? I was doing a different mountain while they were up on Mount Washington, but they started, the weather was great at the bottom, but on that you go to the halfway point, and apparently the story goes the rangers were all like, you guys are going to keep going because it's very dangerous. People die on that mountain, because the weather rolls in so quickly. Talk about a metaphor for psychology and life. Something comes in and changes so fast, and it makes you go, oh wait, you have to make a decision really quickly. Like, do you sit with what is and then go, oh, I can't do it, you assess the situation for safety or whatever, but then do you go forward and keep going, or do you just quit? It's all metaphors for flipping your perspective and seeing if you can do it. Now certainly, if it's all of a sudden like 50-mile-an-hour winds, which it can be up there, and blowing snow by the time you get to the top in a summer day, which it can, then you shift perspective. But you also have to be able to really, that's like, I think it's one of the most quintessential skills that comes from hiking is the strategizing. And people think, oh, you just go out on a trail and you walk to the top of the mountain and come back down. No, that's nice. But I always love it when I see like people out in like a skirt and flip-flops going up the side of a mountain. And I'm like, oh, this is going to end poorly for this poor person.
They're going to meet a ranger.
Or it's like, but people do it. And I'm like, or they're in like, clothes that just, I'm like, oh, that route's going to get that person, or, wait till they see the wall of rock that comes up that you have to traverse that has no way of grabbing on with those flip-flops, but it's about, again, coming back to changing the perspective and really being able to flip it on its head and being able to accept, no denial, seeing what you can really control for what you can control in the moment, which is most of the time really not a lot. You have control over what you can do next. What can you do to make the day better? What can you do to make your life better today? So anyway, it goes back to, that was my theme for today is really, turn your world upside down a little bit to change your perspective so that you can see it differently. You can come up with different ideas, so that you can accept where you're at and move it, not accept where you're at and sit in the shit. You got to sit with your shit, but then you got to be able to move it. There's another theme of the day. Sit with your shit. There's a visual, right?
Yep.
Dr. Kim says, sit with your shit and then move it.
Yep.
But so I think that if you are looking to have stress less lifestyle and you really want to build your resiliency, is really look at the things you can control. And then if you don't know how and you're feeling like you're really stuck, and you feel helpless, or you feel like you're in that shuttle box of like, the old experiments with the rats and they can't get out, right? Seriously, that's what people feel like. find someone, find a life coach, find someone like me, watch my TikToks, watch other people's TikToks, watch other people's, there's tons of podcasts out there, not just mine. If you, don't like mine, go to someone else and say, don't really do that though. You should really watch this one. But there's lots of ways out there that people have different ways of getting you to move on your needs, move on what you want. And so if you're lacking the how, there's lots of ways to get it. So I think I'm one of your best resources, but nonetheless, I'm all game. Whatever you need to do to get to where you need to go is fine by me.
And I hate to bring this up so late, but you talk about accepting, changing what you can change, controlling what you control.
Yes.
The first concept you have to come up with is you can't change the past.
That's right. No, and people are, and unfortunately, people are very wed to the process of always repeating the undoing of the old trauma. People who have PTSS, post-traumatic stress syndrome, people who have just regrets in life. They sit in what was, what could have been, what should have been, how, and if you are always going on a mission to try to undo by trying to fix what has already happened, which people do. I mean, that's a very common psychological phenomenon and problem. You will not move. You will be stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck because you can't undo it. You can't go back and have the bomb go off. And, I do this with my veterans, the bombs go off. You can't go back and save the guy. You can't go back and not have your parents be mean to you. You can't go back and have the bully not bully you in school. You can't have, you just can't. You can't. But you can do everything from here forward. And if you live in the future and worry about what could be because history will repeat itself, you're going to get stuck there too. And that's what anxiety is. It's the past not being able to be undone, and then the failure to be able to control the future. If
your predominant thought is the future is going to repeat the past, you're going to manifest it. That's how this works. You will create it because you'll self-sabotage. I just tell my clients that you're going to gaslight yourself right into it. You're just going to gaslight over and over into it. So anyway, we did a lot of eye rolls today.
We did. Yeah. Well, did we, or did people?
We called up a lot of eye rolls.
Yes, a lot of phrases that have eye rolls. But so just being aware that those things don't have to mean these, as you put it, hippy dippy things that are from the 60s. They just have to mean something that is more contemporary to you, to move you and to get you out of where there's always movement. There's always a solution. There is. You may not find it, but you can find someone that can help you find it. And that's why people come to me. So again, please follow us here on the show and share the podcast when you hear it. Please like, share, and do all those things on all your favorite podcast channels. And please start following, liking, and sharing me at Dr. Lannon, all one word, on TikTok. And you'll get a lot of great tips, hopefully a few times a week if I stay on it with my little creative director. Okay, you guys have a great week, and I will see you next week.